Hey friends, Dark and Dreadly here. Remember to like my video and subscribe to my channel. And also hit the bell icon if you want to stay on top of my postings. Enjoy the story. I am a certified coroner who works with a very skilled team of biohazard cleaners and mortuary assistants. My crew is usually called in after the police have ruled the cause of death as natural, accidental, or suicidal. Anything else is handled by an unaffiliated crew. As you'd expect, I've seen my fair share of gruesome and harrowing things in my line of work. The first thing that comes to mind is a case I took in early June of last year. An elderly man had slipped in the bathtub and split a nice curve open in his head. He had tripped and, ironically, brained himself on one of the metal handrails that he had installed to prevent himself from falling in the first place. It was a very clean split from the frontal bone to the occipital bone. The man was frozen in a prone position, with blood bubbling up like snot from a fancy new smile opened up in his scalp. The faucet kept filling, and the water had kept rising at a snail's pace. Eventually, it overtook the limescale rings in the tub, one by one. The man had struggled to pull his head above the water's surface for minutes. If only that fresh new ravine in the back of his head could have sucked down air into his lungs. Maybe then he would have lived to take another bath. But that story ends exactly how you would imagine it to. With a wrinkled old corpse with skin stained rose black, laying face down in an overflowing tub full of bloody water. That was the worst case I'd ever seen. Up until last week, that is. I took a call from dispatch about an apparent suicide the police had finished picking the bones clean on. The report said it was a 24-year-old Caucasian female. She was carrying along just fine in her second trimester of pregnancy when she decided to slit her own throat in the middle of the living room. Apparently she did this because the father of the baby decided to step out of the picture. We arrived on scene in two sleek white vans. One was loaded with cleaning supplies, and the other was equipped to load corpses in and out. The lawn was peppered with strips of police tape and an occasional disposable latex glove. Police are often really sloppy at cleanup in my experience. A patrol car across the street that was monitoring the house, waiting for arrival, gave us a veiled wave and then sped off down the street. The home oozed ominousness like an unseen gas leak. The front door gave a shrill protest as it eased open, and almost immediately I felt dread closing in around me like a weighted blanket. There she was, laying face up on a lattice blue rug. Her skin was a sickly pale of muted white, interrupted by the sleek black tangle of her hair, and blotches of carmine blood pooled around her neck and dried in the deep curves of her collarbones. Her belly was horribly distended, bubbled out by the rising bloat and the cold fetus that was inside her womb. The expressiveness waning in the milky crescents of her eyes sent a coarse shiver down my spine. But we had a job to do, so we were gonna do it. We got to work. As respectfully as we could, we pulled a black body bag around the rigor mortis wooden framework that was her body. My assistant Mike then shifted her onto the gurney and we wheeled her out to the van. As we pulled up to the back of the van, our lead biohazard cleaner, Kai, came huffing out of the building after us. He was dressed in his usual neon yellow jumpsuit, but I could see the ripe flex of his muscles from beneath the plastic. Sweat glistened all balmy and dripping from the bow of his massive forehead. "So, you guys are just gonna leave the body back there or what? Where are you two going?" I looked at Kai with bewilderment, and rolling my eyes, I unzipped that body bag so Kai could look inside and see the contents within. However, as soon as I opened the bag, that hinted outline of her body dissolved, and the bag settled down flat. "What the hell, Kai? Is this some kind of sick joke?" I asked, impatiently. A look of terror glazed across the murky brown turbulence of his eyes. Instantly, I knew it was not a joke. A wave of nausea came over me, and I felt invisible ants prickling across the skin of my back. The two of us ran back into the building with Mike following close behind in his hooded jumpsuit. We went back to the family room, and there she was again, laying perfectly posed on the floor in the exact same position we had found her in. I almost vomited my morning breakfast all over the hardwood next to the rug. "Go get the gurney. Now." Mike rushed out. Kai stared down at the corpse with a wrinkle of unease settled on his brow. He switched his balance from foot to foot with an awkward gait, and it really terrified me to see this massive tank of a man so upset. A minute later, I heard the gurney's wheels thumping back up the porch steps. Once again, we loaded the woman into the body bag, dragged the gurney over, and heaved her onto it. This time, I used the heavy straps dangling from the sides to cinch her body in, and I buckled it. I pulled the strap so tight, I could almost hear the soft tendons and ribs beneath the woman's chest twist and crack. We wheeled the woman out toward the van once more. I nodded toward Kai and motioned for him to carefully watch the pool of blood on the rug so he wouldn't slip. We went only as far as the sidewalk when I heard Kai screaming. Quickly, I unzipped the top corner of the bag, and the second I did so, it deflated like a balloon. We went back inside to find Kai mumbling in his native tongue. Kai must be 300 some odd pounds of pure muscle, but there he was, crouching on the floor and curled up like a fetus, with his face racked with fear. Kai's thick fingers were clutching a handful of his own shirt fabric. He had peeled his body out of the top half of the jumpsuit, which was now bundled around his hips, and he was absolutely soaked with sweat. I could hear the convulsive manner of his breathing, see the panic in his eyes, and it reminded me of the time I swallowed a marble when I was a kid. I rushed over to Kai, sidestepping the corpse, which was again back in the usual position in the middle of the floor. Something caught my eye at a passing glance, and I thought I saw a grin on that corpse's face. Kai's skin was quickly blotching with purple spots beneath the crooks of his eyes, which looked swollen and almost to the point of bursting out of his skull. Mike rushed in, and we took Kai under our arms and dragged him out of the house. It took all of our strength and effort, but we managed to get him out to the front lawn. "Call an ambulance now, Mike." Mike rushed away to retrieve his cell phone, and I watched as two little rivers of blood traced down the soft corners of Kai's tear ducts. And then Kai convulsed, and he fell, and he was still. I caught up with Mike and pulled him toward the lawn by the sleeve of his jumper. At this point, I was planning to just load up Kai in the van myself and drive him to the emergency room. But when I turned around, Kai was gone. It took a few seconds for me to choose to take a few steps toward the house. I had a sinister feeling. But then I stopped in my tracks. As I expected, the woman's body was in the exact same position it was in before, with one obvious exception. Her mouth was now obviously curled into a terrible grin. It was wide enough to show her rows of faded tombstone teeth. My eyes diverted to her side, and I saw it then. Propped up against the wall, just a few feet from her, was Kai. Rigid, dead, and he was weeping blood from his eyes.